I'm Steve Chindgren. I'm here at the House of Grouse, and I'm talking with my good friend David Cherry. We're going to have a discussion about Gyr peregrine tiercels and how they play a role in American falconry and falconry throughout the world. Dave has been flying Gyr peregrine tiercels for 40 years, and we're going to go through a few questions that we can answer about them. We feel that they're a bird that has enhanced falconry in America. And and a lot of people wonder why fly a hybrid. We hope to answer these questions in this interview. First of all, I'm going to ask Dave, thank him for being here, and I'm going to ask him, when did you see your very first Gyr peregrine? What was the first one you ever saw?
Probably in 1980 at the Alamosa meet, and we drove up there. You were there. Mike Conley was there. You had Moon Shadow and Gyr prairies, I think, at that time, and some other Gyrs, and they're just...
Was that the Gyr peregrine that belonged to Jim Weaver?
Jim Weaver had one, and then Houlihan had one that was a brother to one that Jim Cramner had in California. And that's that journal that came out that had all those super black ones and white ones and all the different hybrids. We were all like astounded by that.
Yeah, the first one I saw was also at an AFA meet, and it was a bird named Lukey, I think it was, from
Lukey was the white one.
Jim Weaver. Yeah. And I thought, after seeing that bird fly, I was like so impressed. What did you think when you saw your first one you saw fly?
First one I saw fly was a few years later. Steve Martin had it in California. Dave Jamieson bred it. It was named Arco. We were flying a regular pond that I'd seen Mike Conley fly for years, and it came down and like a widgeon's wheeled or something, and it did a big circle like a revolution, and it was kind of like, wow, that thing, and it just could suck up the duck up the valley. You know, it was really impressive, and it was kind of a light-colored blonde bird, and it was just kind of like my mouth open. You know, amazing how agile and powerful that could be. So you pretty much decided you'd like to try one. I just, at that point in my life, I just wanted a black-headed peregrine.
Yeah.
And I have a story that how I ended up getting Ozzy, the bird, in '84. That, you know, Jameson had a peregrine for me, and then it didn't work out, and Operation Falcon came and all this stuff, and then later on he says, well, I have a hybrid for you, and I'm like, I don't know if I want a hybrid, because the year before that, I had a Gyr Shaheen that Mike Howe ended up with that just wasn't a black-headed bird, and the first time in our lives we had a chance to get a peregrine, and I had that for a little bit. Mike ended up getting that bird, but I had Ozzy, which turned out to be a really great bird for me for 14 years.
What is it about the Gyr peregrine that you like the most? Why not just a peregrine? What is better about a Gyr peregrine than a peregrine?
For me, being one of the earlier people in California, there was people that had them, but Rick Sharp had them for a while and stuff. But if you're just hawking ducks in a normal environment, a peregrine's kind of fine. But I kind of went to NAFA meet in '86, and we thought about prairie chickens, and I came up here early in Ozzy's life in '84 and met you and saw you flying calicac on sage grouse, and it just they have the ability to do whatever a peregrine could do and a little bit more. They can hit stuff and fly it down and catch it. I'm not saying I want them to catch it 3 miles away, but they can catch it 100 yards away when a peregrine is not good on the ground, and a Gyr peregrine is almost like a Gyr, to me, is on the ground, similar.
I have to agree with that. One of the things that I like about them and why I chose to fly them is that I like tiercels. And tiercel peregrines were too small for the quarry that I'm hunting, which was sage grouse. Yes. So a Gyr peregrine tiercel, even though some people think that they're too small, I found that they can be very efficient at catching sage grouse. And they're the perfect size bird because you have a tiercel that's the size of a female peregrine.
Yes.
And yet it has a little bit of Gyr in it. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. I know you've trained a lot of them. So we're going to talk about what qualities that you find in a Gyr peregrine that make the ones that you like the best. And, another thing, too, is people make all kinds of hybrids. But, to me, the hybrid that has, really done the most for the sport is the Gyr peregrine. And of course, gyrs are fantastic birds, and peregrines also. And so when you cross the two, you get a good combination. And so I'm going to ask you some questions. Does it matter to you, would you get a gyr peregrine if it was bred from a gyr falcon or a peregrine?
It doesn't matter. I've had 3 or 4 of peregrine gyrs. They usually put gyr into a peregrine. That's way more common.
Yeah.
And I've had a few of those in my life, and I don't notice a whole lot of difference. People say that some of them are a lot bigger, but one of the smallest ones I've ever seen was a peregrine gyr. So it's kind of how nature matches up. But I think sometimes they say the peregrine into a gyr acts more like a peregrine, which some of our qualities, we like the peregrine attributes.
Yeah, I agree with that. The peregrine is the quality. I look for a gyr peregrine that favors a peregrine in the way it looks and in its mannerisms. The ones that favor the gyrs tend to be more like a gyr.
Yes.
And gyr falcons, although they're incredible birds, they're so smart that in time it's hard to keep them flying at a good pitch because they figure things out and they only do what they need to do.
Yes.
So
makes a lot more discipline on our part to deal with those birds, the gyrs.
So how many, roughly, I mentioned you've probably flown them for a long time, but you have any idea how many gyr peregrines you've trained?
Well, I've had about 7 that I've had for falconry purposes for myself, and one during the divorce I lost, and another one got killed early, and some other things, and I had one lived to 23. You had Jomo lived to 20 something.
25, yeah.
And I had this Aussie bird to 14, and the bird I have now is 9, and I've been fortunate having some, but I've trained quite a few over the years just because I lived in a place that I could do that. I still live in a place that I can get them started. It's not really a full training thing. It's just like framing a house. I can get that basic thing going, get them going really nice to the balloons and drones and all those tools we use. And probably 30, so maybe like 20, 25 or something that I've done. And there's people live in Texas where it's hot and they don't have the ability to do what we do.
So they send them to you to get them started.
Get them started.
So I'm going to ask you a couple questions. So like when you get a bird, gyr peregrine, you like to get it parent reared, correct?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
I like them parent reared. They some breeders do a better job parent rearing them than others. Some of them, you've bred birds before. I bred birds, and if you go mess with them in there, they develop a pretty early fear of people. And if you kind of keep them isolated and they don't see that, they come out a little bit easier to work with. For me, I just don't like the mantling and those traits of those things. And a good parent-reared bird makes me proud to walk around with it.
What age would you take your bird from the chamber?
A male, probably 8.5 weeks old, 9 weeks old. Older's okay, but then they can just be a little bit more rammy and anxious about stuff.
Yeah.
But any younger than that, I've seen hunger traces before. I've seen feathers pinch off and some other traits that I wasn't that happy with. And
you want the bird completely hard penned before you take it out of the chamber?
I do, yes.
And then when you take the bird out of the chamber, the way I've always done it is I just immediately do it in the evening when it's cool, and you grab the bird, you hood it, you get the jesses on it right away. Before you put it up on the fish, you wet it down so that it's wet and doesn't want to bait. And then basically if you just get it sitting on your hand that night and can get it back on a perch without it baiting, I don't do anything till the next day.
Right. I mean, everybody does a little different. I pull them out of a chamber and they're on a block within 15 minutes.
Unhooded?
Unhooded.
Yeah,
everybody's different, but that's what I'm saying. For me, because I usually have another bird out there. And,
you have other birds that can be calm around them, and
then the dogs are walking by the weathering area, and they kind of are afraid of everything. So within 2 days, they're not afraid of a whole lot, as long as you don't go mess with them too much.
You don't want to get any feather damage.
No feather damage. I put the bath pan in a place where they're bait away from the bath pans, and they're drinking water and doing stuff within a day or so, and they eat the first night, second night, third night, and within a week, they're about ready to come to the lure and stuff.
Well.
Oh, they're coming to the lure for me within a week.
A week. And then when you transition from coming to the lure to going to flying to a drone, or nowadays most drones. In the past you used kites and balloons, but
Correct.
you use today mostly drones. So once you've got the bird eating on the fist well and coming to the lure, what would be your next step in flying it to the drone?
I usually always, for me, their weight's coming down every day a little bit. I feed them all they want for the first 5 days, and then it gets to a point where probably, they'll come 50 yards and they're kind of rolling their wings as they're waiting for you to throw the lure out, and then I take the drone out and I'll fly the drone around during the weathering area so they see what it is, and it's a visual. And then I'll put the lure out. I'll put a dead coil or something on the drone and drag it out in front of them. And I just called them in the field the day before, and they'll bob their head and fly out there and grab it. And even if it's dragging on the ground like a rabbit, it's fine.
Yeah.
Next day it's 10 feet, and pretty soon here we go.
Yeah, it's a pretty natural progression. Seems to me that birds like to do that, and in the wild, peregrines fly with food in their feet to entice the birds to chase them, to get exercise. When they chase them hard enough, they give them the food. So for a young bird to fly up to something that's holding food in the air is kind of a natural thing for them to do, and they seem to all like to do it.
Yeah, and I make sure, for me, I'll call it the lure 50 yards as long as it comes immediately, and then I put the drone out there and just drag it on the ground, and it goes away from you 50 yards on a perch. About probably when it goes to 100, 150 feet, I can let it go off my fist.
I'm going to get a little bit off the subject. We'll get back to the drone again. But is there any particular plumage coloration that you look for in a bird, or is it basically the conformation of the bird and just how it flies?
I have a lot of friends that have, that thing's built like a brick and that thing's this and that. And for whatever reason, I just don't see that. The first 50 yards it flies the lure, I can hear the wing beat. It sounds like an Apache helicopter as opposed to a lofty, mothy flying bird. And most of us that's the first thing we ever saw when we saw Gyr peregrines, like, look at that wing beat. It's just pretty extraordinary. And some have better wing beats than others, as we've all seen, but doesn't mean it can't turn out to be a really good bird. But conformation, it's nice to have one that has high shoulders and tight, crosses its wings and looks proud of itself.
Yeah.
Like elegant almost.
Yeah. The fact that you have a Tiercel that flies at the size of a female peregrine.
Yes.
And I like the attitude of a Tiercel. And I think that any falconer that's been in falconry for a long time tends to favor Tiercels because they seem to just be a little easier to train.
Yeah, and they like to fly. Most Tiercels like to fly. Females kind of in a few years. Some of them just get a little, they just don't. Yeah, and I know that, all these birds I've trained over the years for people and myself, it's really nice. The Tiercel has a natural tendency to give up the food. Yeah. Eagles come in, red tails come in, things come in on them, they'll give up the food. But I've seen lots of females get killed by, they're willing to fight for their
they're
meal.
Bigger and stronger and think they have a chance, and the Tiercels are a little more, they better get out of here because they know they can be eaten. Yeah. I've had people, tell me, why don't you fly gyrs? You live in the perfect place. It's cold up in Wyoming, and you got the large sage grouse, and gyr falcons seem to be the perfect bird to hunt them with. Well, I have flown a number of gyrs on sage grouse, and the first year they fly incredible. But gyr falcons are really smart, and they're an exceptionally rewarding bird to work with because they have a very almost intelligent personality, and you can almost develop a relationship with the gyr, which is, which really touches on your feelings for them. You really get to like them because they're such beautiful and charismatic birds as far as the way that they chop at you, and they're your friend. Problem with jerkins is the first year they fly like gangbusters, but because I'm hunting over pointing dogs, the gyrs are smart. And in too many of those types of experiences, and the gyrs pretty soon hovering over the dog, and especially when they get to be about 3 years old. And in order to keep them flying good, I haven't been able to do it in a long-term relationship with a gyr. They always get to where they're very efficient. They catch a lot of game, but they don't do it with the style that the gyr peregrine does. And so that's why I like the gyr peregrine Tiercels opposed to gyr falcons. And of course, Tiercel peregrines, for the quarry that I'm hunting, are just basically too small.
Yeah. People at a long time got female gyr peregrines, smaller gyr shaheens and smaller ones, but they'll fly good for a couple years, and there's people I've known that say they still have really good flying ones.
Yeah.
But it just takes a lot more work and maybe a lot more special birds. And I know that, but like I said, I haven't seen a lot of those give up food either. I've seen your birds jump off of them and just be sitting on a piece of sagebrush
watching for
eagles.
Yeah. So, in your opinion, the Gyr peregrine Tiercel is the best hybrid for falconry?
For me, it is. I mean, there's different people that talk about different things, and some birds hit harder, some birds do this. Gyr peregrine Tiercel's flown right at good hunting weights and all that. They can fly stuff down, but that's not why we're out there to go tail chase things. But they're the best bird for me, and I found that niche of what I like to do. And when I go travel, I can catch 4 or 5 grouse on a trip. But as Gyr peregrine Tiercel with a female peregrine, I might catch 2 because they just got to come down and bind to them and stuff, which is great. But for me, it's just like it's a little bit more fun to bring home a few more things from time to time.
Well, the Gyr peregrine has a great motor, and it's not necessarily a bird that's going to catch more game than these other larger birds, but it will catch the game with better style.
Yes.
And that's why I like them. And I've flown basically sage grouse. I've caught a few prairie chickens and sharptails and ducks with Gyr peregrines, but I've focused mostly on sage grouse since I started flying them in 1988. Yes. And I've basically flown Gyr peregrines, a few Gyrs that I flew, but the problems with the Gyrs is especially if they're light birds, boy, I'll tell you that they're like a neon light to an eagle when they're out there in the desert, and they don't seem to last very long. They always seem to get killed. And we have a lot of eagles here where I hunt, and and the fact that I just like this perfect size, and I like the dynamic wing beat, and it's just that they seem to have hybrid vigor. I think there's truth to that.
I do too.
What kind of quarries have you flown with your?
Mostly ducks in my life. Caught more prairie chickens than most people in California and sharptail. Lessers, graders, when they were available. Traveled with my friends. In California, we had a lot of guys. Mostly people just had peregrines, and I go, let's go to Nebraska, and I don't want to do that. So I just didn't go some years, or I found other friends.
Yeah.
But for me, mostly I caught huns and sage grouse, and I was always afraid to fly sage grouse
because of eagles.
Because you've had some catastrophes.
I've lost 10 birds to eagles.
And it was always scary for me. And we had a couple times where my tail went between my legs and I went home. But I've overcome that and have dogs that help me out a little bit, and I've understood stuff and watched my birds jump off a quarry. You can't always save them from eagles, but it's just I've enjoyed the whole thing with that, and been able to go, and they fly in wind a little bit better than other places.
Yeah, I agree with that. That Gyr peregrines fly good in wind. They're just a Tiercel, and a Tiercel is the size of a female peregrine. That's what makes them so great. But they're not for everyone, because if you have areas where, when I went to Spain and I saw the red-legged partridge, I think the Gyr peregrine was too much of a bird for the red-legged partridge, and I think that the Tiercel peregrine was a better match for it, because they're less likely to stoop on them on the ground and things, because peregrines tend to like to catch things in the air, and they're not as so I think, depending on what quarry you're hunting, and if you're living somewhere where you can thermal a bird and then you're flying ducks, peregrine is probably your better choice. We're not saying that in all situations the Gyr peregrine is right for everyone. I think it's a great bird for flying the native grouse of North America and for ducks. But if it was exclusively ducks you were flying, a peregrine might be the bird you would want to choose.
Well, yeah, I think you have a lot living where you live in this place and where we grew up. And in California, I had a bird for a long time that, once a week he'd go fly off and catch pigeon. And it's just not fun going to people's backyards all the time doing that, because they can catch pigeons.
Yeah, if you show a Gyr peregrine too many pigeons, they can get so good on them that they're basically almost ruined. If you live in an area where there's pigeons, I remember going to Nathamates and flying my bird, and it's just gone because it's these pigeons at some farm, 2 miles away. So that can be a real problem. So you got to be careful in showing them too many pigeons, and that's where Both Dave and I have flown in many sky trials and done well in them with deer, peregrine, tiercels, and with other birds. But the gamble with that is if you show your bird too many pigeons, when then to get them ready for a sky trials, then you can have a problem when you're trying to hawk. So it's like often we go to sky trials and our birds aren't that aggressive on the pigeons because we just basically don't show them pigeons. I mean, that's how it is with me. I don't give them pigeons because I don't want them that hot on pigeons because they chase them so far.
Correct. Yeah, I don't, I mean, in California, you just can't have a bird looking for trouble all the time. And the only reason I kind of got away from deer peregrine for a few years because I was going, once a week in somebody's yard doing that. And I just, when the balloon came up and all that, it was like, wow, I can train a bird.
Control a bird.
Throwing 4, 5, 6 pigeons a day again.
Yeah. Often people are looking for a particular color or size in a deer peregrine, and have you found that there's of course, larger sometimes people think is better, but I've found that it doesn't really matter if they're really large, as long as they're at least fly at like 780 grams or even 750 and above. Below that, for the quarry that I'm hunting, is a little bit small, but some of my smaller hybrids have been more aggressive than the larger ones. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well. I know you had some birds at 750, caught all kinds of things.
Yeah, and it's more the heart of the bird than it is the size of the bird.
I've had hybrids at 745, 735 that caught grouse. I've had birds at 780, 790, 800 grams that caught grouse. Some of them at 820, just all the different things. And it's kind of the heart of the bird and a little bit of luck in there where they catch easy stuff first and they don't get beat up by it early, kind of. You get some fortunate situations where the first grouse they catch is some big old boomer thing that just beat them up a little bit. And
it's not a good thing to happen.
They go back and the skin on their faces is showing and they don't look real happy. And then if you get something that catches a few young ones, they think that they can control the world. And there's a little bit of luck involved with that. But I mean, it's basically on the bird and the heart of the bird. And some of the bigger birds tend to, they tend to just fly. They've got more, it's like bigger anything. Sometimes it's harder to do stuff. But, I like the 800 gram birds myself around the mid-range.
I think that's perfect. Ones. Anything that's from, around 800 grams is what I would choose too.
They fly good. They all seem to fly really good around there.
Yeah.
Smaller is okay too. I've seen really small.
They fly great and sometimes have a lot of heart and hit really hard. So you just never know. But for the quarry that I'm flying, which are sage grouse, which are North America's largest species of grouse, it's a pretty good battle for a bird that's less than 700 grams.
Yes, but I remember seeing that Tava bird you had come down and it just got surgical.
I think it could. So, like I say, the most aggressive birds I've had have been the birds that were around 750, 760. But I've had very aggressive birds at 800 as well too. So that if you can get one that's at 800, that's probably what you should strive for if you can find one like that. But don't be discouraged if the only bird you can find is a little smaller because you never know how aggressive they'll be. And it's just
they can be small and accurate and surgical too because they're more like a lightweight fighter type thing.
The way I look at my falcons and my relationship with my dogs is that I'm a coach and I try to be the best coach that I can be to make my team be successful and make my birds be successful. And my goal is to strive to make my birds as strong as they possibly can be, to make them as strong as a wild bird, and to get flights that are high. And the challenge I run into with hunting sage grouse using pointing dogs is that the falcons, they see the dog, they know the dog is on grouse, and so it gets to where if they want to make it work, they all know that the best pitch they can catch a grouse from is like 500 feet. But as falconers, we want to see a better pitch. And so this is where the art of falconry comes in and trying to get the bird to fly higher. And sometimes too much game hawking will lower a pitch. And I'll agree with that because I've experienced it. And so that's where today, where we have ways of making birds go high to the drone and work them that way and get them to fly higher. It's a wonderful tool, and now we have GPS. It makes it. I mean, it's like, can you imagine if we had all this when we were young?
Yes, I mean we used to. I mean, everybody has different ways. We used to go lure fly our birds for 2 weeks and then serve going away and hope they get a good one and things.
Yeah.
And now all the birds have the ability to fly really good, with just us that's up as artists to make sure we can finish the painting and do all that stuff that makes everything a true piece of work.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you sitting and talking with me. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of questions, and we may have to go back and do this again. But Dave Cherry, who has been flying deer peregrines for 40 years, and I've been flying them for a long time as well, since 1988, and I've had great success with them. One thing about them is they don't suffer the having a jeer. They're very susceptible to different types of ailments, asper, and all different types of things, and bumblefoot. And peregrines, they don't take the cold, and so you get the jeer peregrine. You have a bird that will not get sick. You have a bird that can take any kind of temperature and climate. They can fly in the warm, they can fly in the cold, and that's a huge plus up here, because we get really cold temperatures in the winter, and peregrines just want to pull up a foot and fluff up. They don't like cold temperatures. Peregrines fly to where it's warm. They don't stay in the cold. They leave the Arctic and go where it's warm. And so the jeer peregrine Tiercel has been a bird that has I've really enjoyed flying. And like I say, it's not for everyone. There's people that live in certain climates in the world. If I lived in Mexico and was hawking ducks, I'd probably fly a female peregrine.
Oh, absolutely.
Or the female, or a Tiercel peregrine. And peregrines are still universally probably the best bird you can have as a falconer. It just depends on what you're doing, the climate you live in, the quarry you're hunting, and that's where you make the decision. If the decision is based on, these birds fly really good, the decision should be based on your quarry, where you live, and what will work best for you.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, it's been great talking to you, Dave, and we'll probably continue this discussion and do it again next year.
Hey, well, thanks, Steve. It's always fun talking about this whole thing with you every day.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Dave.
Take care. Thank you.